I remember when I walked into HR Plus for that interview, they had colored files like all adorning the office. Like they were all like yellow, blue, green, whatever. And I remember asking, one of the first things I asked in the interview was like, what's up with the colored manila folder? Like the manila folders with all different colors. And they're like, oh, those are due dates. I said, what do you mean those are due dates? And I'm like, well, we promise our customers, a 2 to 3 day turnaround time. And yellow means it's due on Monday. Blue means it's due on Tuesday. And then there were like orange folders everywhere. And I said, what are the orange folders? And they're like, oh, that's U-Haul. which is, which is like one of their largest customers at the time, right? And they had their own folders. And I'm like, so how come they're not, by date? And they're like, we get the U-Haul folders out as quickly as we can. Right? Because they were a client, right?
That's amazing. We all have those stories from the early days. We used to have files by the date the order came in. So Monday was blue because it's Blue Monday. And, if a Monday file was still sitting there Wednesday, I mean, someone better pay attention to it. So
That's right. That's right.
Welcome to Behind the Screens, conversations with background screening pros. I'm Les Rosen, your host, and I'm excited to have you here. On this podcast, we chat with the people who know the background screening world inside and out. Executives, industry experts, legal pros, and more. We dive into their personal stories and insights to give you a real look at what's happening behind the scenes. Whether you work in the screening industry or are just curious, Behind the Screens bring you the real, unfiltered conversations from the people who make it all happen. Stick around for stories you won't hear anywhere else. And ladies and gentlemen, Les Rosen here. Welcome to another episode of Behind the Screens, conversations with background screening pros, the people who actually make it happen and the people in the know. And talk about someone who's in the know is one of my favorite people in the screening industry. The gentleman who I can best describe as a guy who has been there and done that. Mr. Vince Pascarella has, one time or another, has had his fingers involved, I think, in every aspect of the screening industry. He's a compliance guru, but he's done sales and marketing and production and criminal records. And I'm sure he's fooled around with technology and everything else there is to do. Is one of the stalwarts of the screening industry. My pleasure to introduce Mr. Vince Pascarella. Vince, welcome.
Thanks, Les. Happy to be here.
I've known you for years, and I finally, had trouble with your name, and I finally figured out Pascarella. So I finally, in my brain, I finally got through that. I failed to say Pascarella, and here we go.
So most phonetically perfect names are a challenge for folks. So,
right. So Vince, for those who don't know you, I think everyone does, but for those who may not, tell us about what you currently do.
So today I am Chief Legal Officer and Chief Compliance Officer for Inform Data. Inform Data has been in existence under that brand for about 3.5 years. We were the result of the merger between Wholesale Screening Solutions and SJV and Associates, which happened in late 2021.
And you started off with which one of those again?
With Wholesale Screening Solutions as part of the Lowers Risk Group.
Okay. And so how long have you been with Lowers Risk Group, Wholesale Screening, and now Inform Data altogether?
At the risk of revealing my advanced age, about 13 years, believe it or not.
Well, the fact that you can remember means your age isn't that advanced, so that's pretty good. All right. So
yeah, I've always liked you, Mike.
All right. So what's your current position there? What are you currently doing at Inform Data?
I run our internal compliance function with a small team, and then I run our internal legal in general function with a hybrid team, a small team inside, and then I use outside counsel for various matters and manage all those relationships.
I mean, considering the length and breadth of service offerings, that's probably going to keep you pretty busy. What areas do you really focus on among others?
Yeah, I joke internally that I'm doing 3 or 4 people's jobs, but we have a pretty robust compliance infrastructure internally. So that entails like all of our internal policies and procedures, all of our contractual obligations to both vendors and customers. And then, of course, consumer disputes, everyone in this industry's favorite topic. So that all falls under our compliance function. We have some overlap with our quality department as well. On the legal side, I do everything from contracts to commercial insurance policies to managing. I'm not a litigator. I don't do litigation directly, but I manage outside counsel and do litigation support for them when we occasionally find ourselves in the uncomfortable position of defending ourselves and our customers in a litigation environment.
Well, and Pam Devon was on the show recently. She basically said it's no longer an issue of if a firm will be sued, it's just when. That's just part of the territory.
Well, and unfortunately, too, it's like it happens once. The likelihood of it happening a second time is greater than the likelihood of it happening the first time, right? Like once you're squarely in the radar of the litigant side, the plaintiff's bar, it's hard to get out of these sites,
I have a flash to the third Godfather movie where Michael Corleone, they just made an attempt on his life, and people are saying, "Oh boy, this is terrible." And Michael says, "No, this is the life we chose." Right?
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So that was just part and parcel of if you're in the screening industry, that's just another cost of doing business, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's this. I'm going to say this real quick story just because it's fresh in my head, right? Like the argument of the plaintiff bar is always like, the background screening industry, they're the evil empire, they're only interested in making money. They cut corners, it's like, sloppy data, et cetera, et cetera. And then you read one of their complaints and it's like a cut and paste from their last lawsuit. And they're calling us like another company's name and they got their client's name wrong in the document. It's quite hysterical. I'm like, who's the sloppy out for money cut and paste guys here? Like, I'm pretty sure it's you.
Right. Well, that's the world we live in. So obviously, you must find it interesting because it sounds like you're kind of the Swiss Army knife person when it comes to the number of different things that you're confronted with.
Yeah, absolutely. But, no man is an island, right? We have a very solid team here at Informed, and I rely on the expertise of, those on my teams and those leaders in the other functions in our company. Robust quality program helps a lot. That keeps my job to, a bare minimum, right? Quality first and, legal last, I like fund them and then you don't have to fund me, right?
That's worth repeating. Quality first, legal last. I
Right.
love that phrase. Yeah, I hadn't heard that before. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, that's good. What was your career path that got you to Inform Data and doing all the things you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when I was in 7th grade, I started with a paper route in my neighborhood, me and a buddy. Just kidding. Just kidding. I actually got into the space in 1998. I think it was when everyone was riding around in horse-drawn buggies and we were communicating via Morse code, I believe is the way we did that, if I recall correctly back then. But I was a young lawyer, a new law school graduate who had sat for the bar exam, but was waiting on results. When I answered an advertisement in a small mountain town in Colorado I was living in because I needed to eat while I waited for my bar exam results. And it was actually for a fast-growing background check company. Some of the old-timers in this industry were called HR Plus, now part of the First Advantage Sterling Empire. But we were a family-owned company, started in a small mountain town, Evergreen, Colorado, just above Denver. And they were looking for, help. They were growing rapidly and had a lot of administrative needs internally. So I answered a non-legal job advertisement. Got the interview to my surprise and, came in, interviewed, met the husband and wife team, Doug and Janet Hahn, fantastic people. And they told me a lot about their company, their industry, their growth trajectory, what they were projecting for growth. Sounded really interesting to me. They indicated a need for, essentially like almost a general manager role. And they needed help with all their internal sort of compliance functions, things like writing an employee handbook, putting together employment policies, documenting their existing operating procedures and policies, reviewing their contracts and rewriting those. And I think the thing that tipped it over for me in terms of getting an offer there was the fact that the FCRA had been amended something like 3 times in the preceding 4 years. And they were using, some mountain town general legal practitioner to do all of their corporate matters, including their FCRA compliance. And let's just say it was a little bit of a challenge for the guy who, when he hung up the phone with Doug, going over like a Fair Credit Reporting Act amendment, picked up the phone and called his DUI clients, right? Like, as a general practitioner, one-man law office they were using. So they said, we'll take a risk on you if you'll take a risk on us. Had a very general role there, not strictly legal. I hadn't passed the bar exam yet, or at least hadn't had the results yet. Fast forward a few months, I get the bar exam results, and this is a really funny story. Doug Hahn slides business cards across his desk, and I look at them one at a time, and they're all corporate counsel for other background check industry companies. And I'm like, what's this for? This is the day I'm getting sworn in to the Colorado bar, and he says, well, pick your title. And I'm like, what? He's like, which one of these titles do you like? Like, congratulations, you passed the bar. I'm going to order your business cards today. We want to offer you a counsel role in our organization if we're busted up for you to stay here after you pass the bar. And I looked at all the cards. I wish I could remember the names because I'm sure some of these folks are still in the industry. And I remember looking at the cards and I said, any of these titles? And he said, yes. And I literally had my license for about an hour at this point, right? And I hadn't even been sworn in yet, so I guess I technically didn't have it at all. And I said, I kind of like this one right here. He said, General Counsel? And I'm like, yeah. And he said, okay, we'll do that. And so my first job in the industry and my first job as a licensed attorney was general counsel for a rapidly growing family-owned CRA in the mountain town of Evergreen, Colorado.
Well, and for those of you that are maybe new to the industry, I mean, if you're not familiar with HR Plus and Doug Hahn and that organization, I mean, that's really the ground floor. That was a happening firm. That was back in the late 90s. And I mean, that was quite an organization, as I recall.
Yeah, really well run, quality, accuracy, compliance first, built a great reputation, high touch, high quality, much like ESR, Les.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I remember talking to Doug. I thought he was a great guy. And that must have been really exciting. So you were there on the ground floor writing the first procedure manuals and quality control and just basically doing it all. All right.
Yes. Yeah. As we all did in the small startup organizations, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. And then at some point they sold and then you...
Yeah. So, late in my role there, I was general counsel, but really we were small enough where I was really just a general executive. And the part of the job that I really came to enjoy the most was supporting the sales team, right? So we had quite a quiet client list. We were a larger CRA at the time, and we had a marquee customer list. And most of the organizations that we went after were, we hunted elephants was really what we did. And, I got into helping the sales leadership write and respond to RFPs. And I really enjoyed that. And then when we would, make it to the presentation round of the RFP process, they often would ask me to help, believe it or not, in the face-to-face presentation aspect of the RFP process, right? I mean, poor judgment on their part, but hey, slim pickings in Evergreen, Colorado, you know what I'm saying? So anyway, I started to do that, write the RFPs with the sales teams, present, the RFPs and our capabilities to prospective customers in the later rounds of the RFP process. And I really enjoyed that and, found myself sort of rethinking my career path, right? Did I want to just be an attorney, in this space? That I just want to be, corporate counsel, that sort of thing? Or did I want to do something broader, in the industry? And so I started myself down that path with them. And then person I came to know and trust and respect in the industry through the founding of NAPBS reached out to me when I found myself as a free agent after HR Plus sold to private equity. And I went to work for this delightful gentleman in Northern California for a little while. He took a chance on me doing a hybrid compliance and sales role. And then based on his faith and trust, I think others in the industry later took a similar chance on me as I, kind of grew from, people who used to think of me as a lawyer only, compliance first person into like a broader executive in the screening industry. And that segued itself into a role running software provider to the background check industry, one of the largest software providers, third-party platforms. Did that for a little while. And then about 13 years ago, landed at Lauer's Risk Group. At the time, we had a CRA called Proforma, and then we had wholesale screening solutions amongst several other businesses outside of the screening space. So I came in there in a full VP of sales role across all of the operating entities. Did that for a number of years, and then I joked that I grew myself out of a sales leadership role, right? Like I did a good enough job where we could afford to hire a true, expert sales leader, and they were nice enough to decide to keep me on in a legal leadership role. So, that's kind of my full path back and forth between compliance and sales. And then obviously in some of the, some of these organizations were small enough where I also had, more of a broad operations and technology role.
Oh, that's fascinating. And just out of curiosity, the gentleman you mentioned in Northern California, that guy, remember, like incredibly good looking, incredibly smart.
Yes, I think some consider him, an icon in the industry and perhaps the only reason PBSA exists today. For those of you unfamiliar with this gentleman, his name is Les Rosen.
Oh, that's me. All right. I knew it sounded familiar, but I'd just been diagnosed with a medical condition called CRS. Can't remember stuff. And so I knew what you said sounded familiar, but that was me who was a gentleman in Northern California. Okay, I appreciate that. All right.
Yes, yes,
Oh, that was great. Those were great times.
definitely.
Good stuff. So basically, I mean, it's just a fascinating journey you've had, and also just the length and breadth and depth of the things you've done is really amazing. Based on that, one of my standard questions, and I'll put it to you, is there a lesson that you learned early in your career or at some point in your career that stuck with you and that kind of stands out as something that, oh yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, you've been in this space long enough to know this as well, as than I think some of the other old timers like you and I are familiar with this as well. This industry, like many industries at the end of the day, when you kind of understand it and spend enough time in it, is a very small industry, right? It's, everyone knows, each other knows of each other. If you don't know somebody, you know somebody who does, right? And early in my career, I met, I think, the Hans being examples of this, yourself being example of this. I met people. I was fortunate enough to have people around me in this space who had built reputations based on trust and integrity, who knew the importance of their reputation. And I think one of the early lessons I learned is, even in an industry where you have some anonymity, the importance of, integrity and the importance of and the value of your reputation is perhaps the most valuable thing, that you have, and something that you can lose easily and gain back with a great deal of difficulty. So for, the younger people out there just starting their careers in this space, not just because of its size, but because it's the right thing to do, be mindful of, your reputation and your integrity and how you operate, whether that's with, your colleagues, your vendors, your customers, or, the person holding the door for you at the PBSA conference hotel as you enter, right? Being a person who's respectful to others and somebody thinks of when they think of trust and integrity is really core to your success.
Boy, that's such a great observation, and I really love the fact that the way you say it extends not just to your coworkers, your employer, but your competitors, your friends, customers, applicants, consumers, waiters and waitresses in restaurants, just everybody. The lesson to be learned is to treat everybody right. And I think that's just such a great observation. So I appreciate that. What do you enjoy most about the background screening industry? I mean, you obviously were a talented guy, and you could be in any industry you wanted to. What keeps you in the background industry, or what attracts you, or what do you find interesting about it?
It's actually funny. I have a 14-year-old son who's, a bit of a nerd. He's actually in a STEM program out here in Virginia. And the path he's on that he wants to stay on is computer science. And so we were having a conversation the other day about like what in that area does he want to do? And, he was explaining it to me and I knew what he was talking about, shockingly to him, I think. And we had he's 14, right? Turning 15. So we're in the dad's an idiot stage of our relationship, right? So, and, oh yeah, sure, dad, you did things like this too, back in the Stone Age, right? So, I figure I got 10 years more of that. And then I'll realize, that there is actually some wisdom in his father. But anyway, we were talking about that. And I think he was surprised at sort of my fluency, if you will, with respect to, things tech, right? And just to be clear, I'm not a coder, I'm not to that level, but I do know how all the pieces fit together fairly well. And, I was saying to him that what I've liked about what I do today, don't get me wrong, I like some of the lawyer stuff too. But what I really like about what I do today and where this industry has evolved over time is, like that intersection or that crossroads between like legal compliance, policy compliance, and technology. Like being able to get with a development team and spec and then, test and use, a piece of software that helps, inform data be more compliant, helps our customers and their customers stay in compliance. Like that's pretty exciting to me. We built a couple of tools, without revealing a lot of detail in our IP here, but we built two tools here that I'm particularly proud of that, are just examples of that sort of crossroads. We call one heightened risk. And so this stems from, there was a lawsuit back a few years ago. I'll leave the names of the guilty out of the equation, but there was a lawsuit several years ago, probably a decade or more ago now, where a larger CRA in our space had made the same repeated mistake on the same consumer across multiple employers over a relatively short period of time. They would correct it in instance one and then repeat it in instance two, correct it in instance two, repeat it in instance three. This happened at least four times. It might have been six. I can't recall, but over a relatively short period of time. Well, the guy was willing to be, forgiving the first couple of times. Eventually, he got fed up, filed a lawsuit, and there was a pretty significant low seven figure settlement. And, I remember that happened, I believe, like around when I started at Lauer's Risk Group Wholesale Screening Solutions. And I said, to the leadership there, like, hey, we need to prevent this from occurring.
Right.
And if we do this at wholesale, this benefits all of our CRA customers, from, having a repeat occurrence of a defect, right? And so we built a tool, we call it heightened risk. And basically what it does is it controls that. So we have various settings where we can set it broadly, and we say like, oh, anytime Vince Pascarella comes across, he's a problem child. We're going to do like a third or fourth round of quality assurance, right? It comes into a special queue managed by like, our senior most teammates that do like quality review. And they make sure that, based on, details we have about the initial defect, that we don't repeat that defect.
Right.
And we can dial that up or down. We could talk about a specific case in a specific court for a specific consumer, or we can say this consumer in general, is a concern because of the complexity of the issue the first time or for some other reason, right? Heightened scrutiny is a tool we built here at Informed Data, which is essentially intended to, so the two most common sort of defects, if you will, if you're a wholesaler like us or a CRA, right, are, a mismatch on identifiers or calling someone a felon when they're not, right? They're arrested
Right.
for a felony, but it gets amended to a misdemeanor. And so, we have addressed the latter common defect. I mean, not common like it happens a lot, but common like when a defect happens, it's often this type of a defect, right?
Right. Yeah.
Just because the way dockets are structured and all of that. But we built the tool that says, hey, what do we know about felonies or what do we know about misdemeanors that are unique to felonies or unique to misdemeanors that can't be, are there aspects of this case detail that means it must be a felony or it can't be a felony? Right. And so we're rolling this out, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, because there are uniquenesses, in the dockets that are specific to, either a whole state in a consolidated court system or in an individual court for a non-consolidated jurisdiction. And we say like, hey, if it hits on this and there's an abnormality where we're calling it a felony, but it can't be a felony based on these rules we've created, it goes into a special queue and it gets reviewed and we do another layer of quality control.
Right. So you can raise a red flag based upon any number of factors, and you and I are both lawyers, so we don't need to go into all the poor people, all the details. But yeah, when you dig into it, you can find what those flags are.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but building that stuff is the fun part, right? Like thinking it through and figuring out like, hey, you can build it this way and it'll cost like $1 million and take 10 years to do, or you can build it, slowly this way and it costs you like, $1,000 a month for a year. And, what's the system capable of? And, how do I get priority in the development queue for this, based on how you kind of structure it. And that part's just fascinating to me and super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and what you described is the journey that we're all familiar with. I mean, trying to do things and competing for development time and the cost benefits. So yeah, I mean, intellectually, it is very interesting, and it's always a challenge. So it keeps you busy, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. That's why you when I knew you used to have a full head of hair, and I think, no, I'm just kidding. Right.
That's right.
Like I'm one to talk, right? Right.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I was actually thinking about when prepping for this conversation, how this industry has evolved, right? And, we're talking about like, development time and technical specifications and, quality testing of new software and all of that. But, back when you and I started, I mean, gosh, I remember when I walked into HR Plus for that interview, they had colored files like all adorning the office. Like they were all like yellow, blue, green, whatever. And I remember asking, one of the first things I asked in the interview was like, what's up with the colored manila folder? Like the manila folders been all different colors. And they're like, oh, those are due dates. I said, what do you mean those are due dates? And like, well, we promise our customers, a 2 to 3 day turnaround time. And yellow means it's due on Monday. Blue means it's due on Tuesday. And then there were like orange folders everywhere. And I said, what are the orange folders? And they're like, oh, that's U-Haul. which is like one of their largest customers at the time, right? And they had their own folders. And I'm like, so how come they're not, by date? And they're like, we get the U-Haul folders out as quickly as we can, right? Because they were a client, right?
That's amazing. We all have those stories from the early days. We used to have files by the date the order came in. So Monday was blue because it's Blue Monday. And if a Monday file was still sitting there Wednesday, I mean, someone better pay attention to it. So
That's right. That's right.
and people in the industry now, particularly with the data background, are going, what are you people talking about?
Oh
How
yeah.
is it even possible to build $1 million firms with blue folders? Right? And we did it.
When I first got there, right, everything was fax, right? You would fax the
Yeah.
court. Like SJV was, one of my vendors at HR Plus back in like 1999, right? Scott Vanek, when he was a startup wholesaler in the industry, we were one of his, early accounts or whatever. And, we would fax him orders. He would fax us results back, right? Like it literally like paper would come out of the fax machine with the results.
Yeah.
Somebody would pick it up, put it in a folder, bring it over for data entry, right? And I remember when we installed WriteFax, like it was like 1999 or 2000. I'd been there for like a year, maybe two, whatever. And we installed WriteFax. And for those youngins on the watching the podcast today, WriteFax basically digitized the fax, so it would still come in via fax, but it would digitize the paper. So you didn't have to like pick up a piece of paper and move it into a folder. You could pick up the piece of paper. But what we used to do, we use WriteFax. You could print it at your desk. That was like so instead of having to walk over to the fax machine, put it back in the folder, right? And then
At the time, that was a leap. All right.
right.
And it's interesting. You were into HR Plus because the FCRA was amended, substantially for employment purposes in '96, effective '97. It was just a total, huge, shattering, earth-changing changes in how it all handled, and then some changes since. Yeah, you really were there, from the beginning, and that makes it really interesting to have that type of perspective.
Do you remember the pocket constitutions list? The little
Right.
constitutions that.
Yeah.
So we had a pocket FCRA at
Right.
HR Plus. Yeah.
All right. And those were the days, and again, a lot of people go, what are you talking about? When we all read and studied and looked at the tea leaves that were contained in the FTC staff opinion letters. Right? And those were the signs that we would look at to figure out what to do. I mean, interesting. And, sometimes I ask about changes and challenges, but I think you've covered that. All right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
looking back at your career in the background screening industry, what actually do you look back and say to yourself, God, that was cool? I mean, that brings a smile to your face as an accomplishment or a challenge met or something that you go, yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, I think two things really stand out to me. One's personal and one's more like sort of team oriented, right? So I'll do the personal one first. So I think it was like around 2005 or something, found myself, at this sort of like crossroads in my career where I was like, do I want to stay in the industry? Do I want to leave? Do I want to do something on my own? Do I want to work for someone else again? Like that sort of a thing. And I remember, mentally setting a goal for myself of I want to lead a company in the role of like president or CEO within the next 5 years, whether that's my own thing or whether I, do that for someone else who, is it where there's an impact on the industry. Was if I was going to do it for somebody else, I wanted it to be, an interesting role that was like different and new, and that was like somewhere in the center of the industry that would have, more of an impact on, an impact on more than just one organization, right? And lo and behold, exactly 5 years later, I joined ClearStar as president. And I just remember when I hung up the phone with Bob Vale and, knew that offer was coming, I just said I smiled to myself, you said to yourself 5 years, and you wanted something like this, and here it is. Right. And so, thanks Bob for that opportunity and for filling up a personal goal of mine. I, definitely forever grateful for that opportunity.
That's great. And what was the second one? You said there was two of them.
Oh, yeah, yeah. The second one was honestly just the trajectory and the path of what is today informed data. When I joined wholesale screening in early 2012, we were a relatively small company. I think if I had an employee number, it would be 34 or something like that. And that's across, pro forma wholesale and the remainder of Lauer's Risk Group, right? So we went from there to where we are today in a relatively short time frame. I'm like forever proud of that accomplishment. I mean, the team we had at wholesale, the team we had and have at Inform Data, current and past teams at both places were truly amazing. I mean, I used to talk about this whenever anybody would ask, like, how did you guys do it? And quite honestly, back to like an earlier tenet I was talking about, I mean, trust and integrity. I mean, we trusted each other. We knew we could rely on the word of one another. And it was just, it is and remains a really fun ride, with a lot of great people. People have come and gone, but I think the one core trait of, both, I think, legacy organizations, SJV and wholesale, and, what is today informed data has been the quality and the caliber of the people from a competency standpoint, but also from a character integrity perspective as well. Just a lot of great people.
Oh, that's fantastic, man. And your ride there continues. I mean, you're still involved in all the things that are happening and transforming and all the new things that are occurring, and so that must be fun as well.
Yeah, it's great. And the evolution of technology in general in this space has been fascinating to watch. And, like the new frontier now is AI, right? And then, adopting the use of that throughout our organization for the betterment of ourselves and the betterment of our customers and their customers, and ultimately the consumer, doing really exciting and interesting things, along those lines. It's never a dull moment, right? It's been an opportunity to kind of grow, from my own sort of knowledge set. Every year is, a little bit different. There's something new, interesting, and challenging, and new things to learn and discover and play around with. And it's definitely still an exciting industry.
I mean, the story you told earlier about your son being impressed that you actually knew about some of this stuff. It just reminded me of the old story that you get smarter as your kids get older. That's all right.
That's right. That's right.
You get to a stage where you're not as dumb as I thought. It's all right, but have to live through that stage. All right. Well,
Right, yeah, you're a hero till they're like 12, and then you're an idiot until they're 24, right?
you're right. And then at 24, they become interesting, and you become interesting to them again. But hey, that's like they said in The Lion King. That's just the cycle of life. What are you going to do? So you mentioned PBSA, and I appreciate your comments about the PBSA and my role in that and so forth. But let's talk about your role in PSA, because I remember you in PBSA from the very beginning and at conferences and presenting. Tell us what the role of PBSA has been in your career.
Yeah, it's been really instrumental, I think, in my career path. I mean, first got involved in PBSA before it was even NAPBS, right? Like there was a small group of folks, you recall, you were the leader amongst them, who decided that this was a need in the industry. We were approached, HR Plus was approached by that core group that I think at that Clearwater Pre-Employment Screeners Conference had originally come up with like this idea, this concept. And we were approached, and initially we were a little skeptical, like, like, is this something we want to do? Does this have legs? Is this a good idea for us? Is this going to be good for the industry or not? And so we were a little bit slow to kind of adopt that. So we weren't directly involved in sort of like the formation of it, but we did wisen up in time to make the first actual conference that was held in Scottsdale in 2003. I think that was. That's right.
Right.
And so we were a founding member. I think we were like a very late round, like just under the whistle founding member. But we were able to put that moniker on our marketing materials. So we made it to the dance. And just from the moment, that I walked into that really tiny hotel in Scottsdale, and obviously I knew you already. I recall we may have been supporting you with your drug testing at some point. And I think we met that way originally.
Right. Exactly.
And
That's right. Yeah.
yeah. And then I knew of you more than I knew you. I think we had emailed and talked on the phone, but I don't think we'd ever met in person. And, from the moment we walked into that space, I mean, I still have relationships from that first day, in this industry, obviously you amongst them, but the caliber and the quality of the people in that room was so high, at that conference, and the energy level was so exciting that, we knew we made the right decision in doing that, the Hans and I, right? So I was the only non-Han present at the early NAPPS events, which was great because it allowed me to meet everybody, because they would go out for family dinners and I would be left alone, not knowing anyone and, looking for friends, right? So got involved early. I think the first 2 years that NAPBS, the predecessor to PBSA, existed, I was fortunate enough to co-chair what is now industry practices. I think it was called best practices or compliance and best practices or something like that back then.
Yeah, I don't remember. I just remember the night before it started, I just made up some committees. I said, well, here are some committees. Let's see how that works. And that was one of them. That's right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because you were probably up all night with you had 4 hours of sleep, right? Yeah. For those of you that don't know, Les does more work between midnight and 6 a.m. than most of us do in a week. Like, it's insane. Like, so probably still today, I think this is true. I don't know how he does it, but it was impressive to see the amount of work and the quality of it that comes into my inbox at 3 a.m. But yeah, like, so that was the beginning of, my involvement with NAPBS, PBSA, and, every company that I, moved to in this industry was a result of the relationships I built through, my involvement with PBSA. A lot of my, leadership experiences were through that organization. It's really just a great organization, particularly for people that are new to the industry or earlier career. I got to do things like government relations that I never would have gotten an opportunity to do without, my involvement with PBSA. I got to do things outside of really like what my core function happened to be at the time. A lot of opportunities to learn new things and really understand how all the pieces fit together, whether that's like the vendors or, the softwares or, the technology or, all the ins and outs of the industry. Just a great place to learn.
And I know you presented, and you and I were on Tony the Time Bomb together, right?
Yes, yes.
Art Cohen's concoction.
Yes.
Putting together mock trials with Tony the Time Bomb being the bad guy, right?
Can we get away with that today? That seems like not politically correct to call the job applicant Tony Time Bomb. I think those were simpler times.
Different world, right? We probably wouldn't do that today, right? But
I mean, like Tony, give him a chance.
Yeah, I mean, today would be second chance Tony. You're right, but that's right. I guess it was in Tennessee. It was at Nashville. We put together
That's right.
It was like a 3-hour trial or something. And you were, I can't remember what all the roles were.
Oh, I do. I remember, and here's why I remember. I think everybody involved was a lawyer, except only 3 of us could be the lawyers in the room, right? So Art Cohen was the judge, and so the 3 litigators they chose, right, were Les Rosen, Pam Devada, and Vince Pascarella. Let me tell you a little bit of something about the caliber of the litigation experience. So Les is like a career litigator, right? Like for those of you that don't know, right? He cut his teeth, as both the prosecutor and a defense attorney, like a lot of trial room experience. Pam Devada speaks for herself. I don't need to say much there. And then me. So I got to go, I was representing the CRA. So I'm litigation counsel for the Consumer Reporting Agency. I don't know who came up with this idea, Art Cohen, but I'm pretty sure it was you. And then I have to go up against Pam Devada and Les Rosen. Let me tell you something. That was a really intimidating experience. And then Art Cohen acted like an actual judge.
He appropriately harumphed from the bench. Oh God,
right. And then Art's also a very experienced litigator, so it was a good time for Vince. I'm pretty sure the CRA lost didn't they go out of business as a result of their litigation counsel? I think that's.
I'm not sure, but Jason Morris brought Tony the Time Bomb back a couple years ago, and we did it again. And I can't remember who. There's a whole cast of lawyers who were
involved. Yes, I attended
that.
That was great.
Yeah. You managed to keep a low profile and not get picked as one of the attorneys this time.
I told Jason no way.
Yeah, really. And I said, I don't want to do any work. I'm going to be the judge. So that's right. I'm not going to actually prepare anything. It was a great group of people. That was really fun. So let's move away from background screening and PBSA. Mr. Vince Pascarella, tell us a little bit about yourself outside of background screening and, some of your hobbies and interests and things you like to do for fun.
Well, my interests include breakdancing. Just kidding.
Yeah, I don't mean you broke a leg dancing. That's what it sounds like. All right.
Yeah, I think that's coming for sure. But I actually dabble in the sport. I'm like the woman in the Olympics there. Did you see that at all? Like the
dancer from Australia, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's about my speed, my style there. But I'm like a fitness person. I work out regularly. I do some road cycling, enjoy snowboarding and hiking. Although I do miss living in Colorado, where it's a heck of a lot easier to do that, than it is here on the East Coast. And, I recently got remarried. So I went from being a single dad of 2 to a father of 6 with a ginormous family of, cousins and aunts and uncles, all locals. So it's been a really fun change on a personal level from spending a lot of time alone or just with my 2 children to now my 6 children and their cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents all locally. So that's been fun over the last 5 years. So.
Good for you. Congratulations. That's fantastic. Yeah. How old is your daughter?
My daughter is a sophomore in college. She just turned 20 a little while ago, but now I have 3 daughters, 23, 2020, and 3 sons, 22,
daughter that I knew as 15. Like a 2 or 3 year old, like a little tyke, is now a sophomore in college.
Yeah, she's studying Italian, actually.
Right.
She's going to do a summer program in Italy, and then she's looking at a master's program that'll put her back in Italy for a whole year. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not like you're making me feel old, but I can remember when she could barely walk, and now she's doing a summer program in Italy, and it's like, okay, right.
Yeah, if I'm remembering right, didn't your daughter babysit her once?
Yeah, it could be. Wow, boy,
It
that puts life in perspective. All
really
right.
does.
Well, okay. I guess I didn't realize that you had that big of a family going. That's fantastic. So, in addition to everything else, to the informed data family that takes up a lot of time, you have your family.
Oh yeah, and it's funny. They're super close. So when we get together, there's literally 30 of us, and so it's like a small wedding, like a Sunday, roughly every other month, right? And then we do a big beach house rental every summer with the 30 of us. And now the older cousins, of course, are all starting to date. So you get like boyfriends and girlfriends making like appearances, and sometimes it's a house of 40. So it's fun.
And you're sitting on top of all that going, oh my word. All right. Oh,
Yes,
God.
my life was so simple when it was me and my two, right?
Yeah, all right. Well, I really appreciate your time here. I can do this all day, but let me wrap it up with a couple final questions. Time to play fun facts. Tell us something about yourself that people may not know or realize, completely unrelated to background screening. Vince Pascarella, what's your secret?
My secret. I have no secrets. I'm an open book, as everyone in this space knows. But little known fact, I guess, would be I started my college career as a fine arts major, drawing and painting specifically. Chose my undergraduate college based on the strength of their fine arts program. And when I got there and saw the talent around me, I got really scared and decided the starving artist was not a good look, and shifted gears into political science, which led me to law school eventually. So
I mean, that is so funny. I know a lot of lawyers who started off as something different. It's like, I think law school. All right.
yeah, I played with sommelier actually. I went to undergrad in the Hamptons and worked in like 3 and 4 star restaurants, and enjoy wine and everything that comes with it, and except the hangover, I suppose. And I literally I took a gap year in between undergrad and law school, and I worked in a restaurant out there known for its wine list, and we had a sommelier, and we became friends, and I was this close. When it was time to leave for Boulder, Colorado, for University of Colorado Law School, I almost didn't do it, like because I was this close to going down the path of sommelier, master sommelier. And
Wow, did you start the sommelier program? And
I didn't, but there's a program, I think it's
yeah.
on Netflix or something, that all of my restaurant friends say is an absolute must. So I think it would scare me off, honestly. It's probably a harder path than law school. Like,
Oh no, it's becoming a sommelier is insane, and
yeah.
all the tasting, and I've always loved those James Bond novels where he would taste a wine and say, a 43 something or other from the upper field of this vineyard or something or other. Like, yeah, really?
Right. Yeah.
Sounds good. I forgot about that because I remember talking with you about your near career as a sommelier, and I think we talked about that once. You took me out for like one of the best dinners I ever remember to an Italian steakhouse in Chicago.
I remember that.
Yeah, we ordered the left side of the menu. All right.
That's right. Yeah, the Sherm conference, I remember
Yeah, exactly. And I think what happened was you said, "Well, you're paying." I said, "Okay, left side of the menu, please." All right.
that.
And it's like more food than I knew existed. It's like, oh my God, that was great. But weren't you originally from Syracuse or someplace that like got
That's
25 feet
right.
of snow during the
Yeah.
winter?
Yeah. I grew up in Syracuse, went to college on Eastern Long Island, and I kind of lived all over though. I've been a tumbleweed after high school, and lived. I don't know. So my kids are impressed by this statistic. I think I've lived in like in something like 19 addresses in 14 cities and 7 states in my lifetime. So
Been kicked out of. I'm not sure I follow. Oh, I
well, it's
see.
funny. People are always like military family or witness protection, right? Like, closer to witness protection is the answer.
Oh, all right. Well, I could keep doing this forever. This is like a lot of fun, and there's so many things. I've known you a long time. I thought I knew all about you, and it's just the insights and the stories are just fantastic. This has been really fun. So before we sign off, a couple last questions. You kind of hit a little bit, but let me just put it right to you directly. If someone came to you and they were thinking about entering the screening profession, or they've been in it for a couple of years, or wondering if they should continue, what's your advice for someone who's new or newish?
Run. No. I kid. I mean, back to some of the things we talked about today. I mean, build a network, right? Like the way the puzzle pieces fit together in this industry is fascinating by its own right, but there is a lot that is opaque, I think, to most people in the industry. There are a lot of connections between like where the data originates, what the data is, who has the data, what data is overlapping or the same, like all that stuff is really fascinating. And then how all like the technology pieces fit together in the space, whether it's the screening space or the drug testing space, is also just like fascinating, puzzle when you understand and see how all those pieces fit together. The people part of that network is, really important. There are a lot of really great people, really smart people in this space. Listen to them, learn from them. And then, remember, you don't get your reputation back once it's lost. So, operate above board and do the right thing and, be a good person, right? For a variety of reasons, both, self-interest and otherwise, right?
Well, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciated it. And let me just ask you before we sign off to give you, as sometimes I say on TV, let me give you the last word, and we'll close it out.
I'll make my last word simple. Thank you, Les. Thank you for your industry leadership. Thank you for your example of integrity. And foremost, thank you for your friendship.
Vince, it's been a pleasure. And ladies and gentlemen, this has been a really fun episode of Behind the Screens, Conversations with Background Pros. And today's pro is a longtime friend and a fantastic resource for the screening industry, an extremely accomplished attorney. You heard about it here, pretty much the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to know, but I think this has been a great introduction. It has been our pleasure to hear from Mr. Vince Pascarella. Thanks, Vince.
Thanks, Les.
All right, that was yet another wonderful conversation with a background screening pro. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an update. And hey, if you got a moment, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It really helps get the word out. For more info or to catch up on past episodes, or to make suggestions or to suggest possible future guests, head over to our website. Once again, this is your host, Les Rosen, and it's been a pleasure to bring you another episode. See you on the next episode. Thanks.